For some weird reason, I decided to record a video. Um, I have been studying Scientology for a long time. Not with Scientology, I mean studying the topic of Scientology, I should say. Um, I am not a fan of Scientology. Quite the opposite. I think L. Ron Hubbard was a charlatan, of course, at the very least. And, of course, the man claimed to be the Antichrist in OT8. He was also schizophrenic. I've worked with a lot of schizophrenic people. I work in mental health, and he definitely was displaying some schizophrenia as early as, well, probably always, but from what I can tell, he's displaying some schizophrenia, at least from the 60s. Excuse the appearance of my hair. I still damp from hopping out of the shower, so. Um, anyway, yeah, Scientology is something that I study in my free time, and I think it's because I was raised Roman Catholic, among other things. I was sent to evangelical camps, Creation Week, things like that. Very cult-like environments. Um, and I will not go as far to say that Roman Catholicism is a cult. I still value the faith very much so, but because of who I am, I've been barred from, the sacrament. Um, I'll leave it at that. Those who know, and those who don't, you don't have to worry about it. However, obviously, Hubbard borrowed a lot from Catholicism, stole confession from the Catholics, and created his own warped and perverted um, version of it called auditing. I've been studying every major figure in anti-Scientology: Jesse Prince, Jerry Armstrong, Hannah Whitfield, all the biggies. And, um, it all started out because I found a YouTube short. I bet many of us are like this. We all found Streets LA, and his videos were obviously very amusing. He shuts down the test center in LA on the Walk of Fame, and you know, we all got into it from there. And then, then I started watching Aaron Smith Levin, and I got into, from there, I got into, Laura FM, found out about DOA, which, I could have skipped that, if possible. Unfortunately, found out about Alonzo and his bullshit. Um, and I I've been watching a lot of videos on Scientology. I thought a lot of the Jesse Prince stuff was interesting, but I noticed that he became evasive when interviewed with Chris Shelton, and kind of was like, just read the book, dude. But he did give a lot of information about his background and how he got into it and how he was susceptible to being taken in by it. Um, but with former Scientologists, you have to be skeptical, especially the ones that are very high in the ranks. There's certain ones I avoid watching or listening to just because they were so high underneath David Miscavige, that, and Elron to an extent. Obviously, Jesse Prince is really the only one who was under Elron, really. Besides, obviously, Jerry Armstrong and Hannah Whitfield, who are um, come across as very noble, in my opinion. Who knows if they really are, but that's how I interpret them. I think Jerry is. I love listening to him talk about Scientology. I think he's right on the money, and I think he's one of the most earnest people in anti-Scientology. I love his essay on black and white Luciferianism in Scientology, especially how he calls it satanic Luciferianism. There's a very special chat talk that he did for John Atack's Going Clear organization, conference, which is the most incredible speech I've ever heard on Scientology, period. And he really lays it out in the totally and purely. Um, There's a lot in anti-Scientology that I don't care for, particularly the anti-Scientologists who still practice some form of auditing, who still promote Dianetics, and anybody who really promotes anything involving L. Ron Hubbard or Scientology is a no-go for me. So people that are still claiming there's validity in anything related to Scientology, that's an automatic no-go, especially because we had the we had the receipts on L. Ron Hubbard declaring himself to be an antichrist figure, and duping his followers to extract money from them, which he plainly admitted to, through his briefs, and um, also through his loyalist followers. Um, I've watched a lot of stuff, Jeffrey Augustine videos, obviously. I think that Jamie Mustard is really courageous, and I think he's one of the leading figures in this area. Even though he doesn't identify himself as an anti-Scientologist, I think that his witness speaks for itself, and anyone who could listen to him and then want to join the Sea Org might be crazy, or want to participate in a religion that abuses children on a regular basis, like Scientology did for years and probably still does. However, it seems like now they basically give the members the option to either have an abortion or to leave the Sea Org, which I guess in some way they acknowledged they weren't very good at child care, seeing as Hannah Whitfield described seeing dead babies in cribs, and what Hubbard did to that 4-year-old boy who got caught with a 5-year-old boy who got caught stealing a Rolex or whatever, got tossed in the chain locker for however many days. What a sick and twisted dude he really was. And obviously, if you listen to other Scientologists or anti-Scientologists, I should say, they describe Miscavige as being no better. In fact, they describe him as being more of a sicko than Hubbard, which is hard to believe. But we know that Miscavige is more of a copycat artist. I don't really know anything about him now, other than he's obviously a very evil person. And from what we learned from Jesse Prince, he seems to be a very unsophisticated buffoon, pretty much, and a bit of a coward, from what we heard from Prince and others, and also just a despicable person who would go to the ends of the earth to destroy somebody who he felt slighted by. And of course, this is all Scientology 101. I don't need to explain that to anybody, fair game and all that stuff, but you really get a sense through this religion of how deeply satanic it is, and I've enjoyed following this cult and understanding it, relating it to my own religious experiences, and seeing where how am I being duped by my own religion. I'm a very deep Roman Catholic, and how I've been in some ways misled. Some idiot next door keeps slamming the door. I'm gonna have to put a sign on that. But anyway, figures, but that's how they roll around here. Dumbasses around here. But anyway, interesting stuff. This is kind of a free flowing video. I decided to keep it rolling, even though I made a couple mistakes beginning. Um, yeah, it's really interesting. I found a number of things very interesting about Scientology. Initially, I was interested in how Hubbard stole from Catholicism, but then also badmouthed it to an absurd degree, which I find, of course, hypocritical. But we're talking about a pathological liar who had no redeeming qualities. I mean, and that's debatable, I guess. If he had redeeming qualities, I guess most people don't think he had any redeeming qualities. Chris Shelton eviscerated him, basically said he's not intelligent, and I think that's right. I think that if you listen to Jerry Armstrong's witness or Hannah Whitfield's witness, you get a better scope of who he was as a person. And by the time Jesse Prince was working with him, he was basically a shell of his former self after the strokes, and he became basically like a monster living inside of the Bluebird motorhome. Excuse me, a monster living inside of the Bluebird motorhome. Um, I've studied Scientology before in the past. I'm 36 now, and I've studied it, and not studied the actual. See, I keep saying that I haven't studied in terms of public Scientologists who go to some rip-off center and study Scientology and Dianetics, which is all a that's what I was doing, which is all of a fraud, right? I haven't done that, of course. But I, in my early 20s, before when I was still in college, maybe 19, 20, 21, I was very bright growing up, and I kind of looked at all my options in life, and of which I had many, and I went to college, things like that. But I noticed back then Scientology was more popular when I was in college, at least in the state of New York. Scientology had a presence in Albany and the surrounding areas. Now it probably has a very little presence there, if any. I haven't looked into it, but I'm pretty certain there's probably no test center anymore in Albany. Nexium obviously sprouted out of Albany and was a disturbing cult, so brought a lot of cult awareness. There's a lot of cults in central New York near um, and outside of central New York, like going, on the tri-state area, on the border between Connecticut and New York and Massachusetts. There's like many, many New Age cults, and in fact, where I grew up, there's about 3 different New Age cults. I was sucked into one for a year, so I did get into a cult by accident. My therapist happened to be in a cult, and she didn't disclose that she was in a cult until I was getting some decent gains. And when people say all the time, well, people want to join Scientology if you weren't getting results. Well, similarly, I was not in Scientology. I was in a different cult created by another monster like Hubbard named Fred Newman, and you can look into that if you Google that name. But I'm not going to get into it besides that. But I had a therapist who was able to get me a lot of gains through her work in social therapy, and for a year, but then became abusive when she realized I was not going to dump my Catholicism to become a communist, and that I still found meaning in talking to priests and going to confession and all that stuff. Now I don't do that now because um, I find I have a disagreement with the church about who I unfortunately who I am as a person is kind of uh, I guess under attack. That's kind of vague. I don't really want to get into my personal issues, but anyway, there's a reason why I don't practice Catholicism. But I still practice it in the sense that I pray and I do a Bible study, and I still believe in the Catholic saints and angels and everything like that. I still believe in all of it, except for I have one disagreement which prevents me from taking the Eucharist. Um, so I've kind of been penalized by my church in an odd way, and they won't let up on me. So I've only had one priest tell me that I could take the Eucharist out of many different ones. And although the priest had told me that was a very holy man who was from my local parish, actually arrived that day from Nigeria and was able to give me a very good confession. And, I'm being a little vague about my personal issue with Roman Catholicism, but I want to say that I believe in all of it and I love the faith deeply. I just have one disagreement. And, my parish priest said you can, the one who was visiting from Nigeria, he said, that I grew up with, he said, you'd be fine, in my opinion, to take the Eucharist. But these things, and then he talked to every other priest and different priests and conservative priests and things like, everybody's got a different opinion, and most of them agree that, that I'm not allowed to take the communion. So, and I have had many priests try to change me and use religious articles and um, what they call relics in the church. I'm not going to get into it fully, but I've been prayed with many relics from Christ's crucifixion, like nails, pieces of wood from the cross, the real cross of Christ, and and these things were kind of done to emotionally extort me and change me as a person. So I do have a very um, difficult relationship with Roman Catholicism, but of course, this video is not necessarily about that, although it does intersect with Hubbard's thievery of it through auditing, which is his form of confession. Again, deeply abusive and deranged, kind of like Satan's form of confession, which would be to record everything and use it as personal collateral against the person, right? That's what Scientology is. So, yeah. So anyway, this is a long and winding video. I get sucked into the YouTube drama between these silly people on the internet, and there's these anti-protesters, or I'm sorry, anti-Scientology protesters, and they get into beefs with each other, and it's so ridiculous, and it's like, and you get sucked into it because you're on this side or this side, and blah blah blah, and this one says this about this one, and it's just ridiculous, And I just felt really sorry for one or anti-Scientologist who grew up in Scientology and was victimized by it, who was being attacked online by I don't know, what I would call a bad actor. And I really was disturbed by the way this person went after this person who had grown up in Scientology, had been a victim all her life, and was abused by Scientology, and then had to deal with this abusive person. I don't want to really name names at this point, but if you know the anti-Scientology movement, you would recognize all the names and stuff of all these people that are involved in it. It's a pretty comprehensive, complex set of personalities, and vaguely interesting. So I keep up with it, unfortunately. Um, for better or worse. But I've done better about not watching people with abusive channels and people that are outright liars. Like I said, the worst are the ones that still defend the practice of Scientology and claim that any form of Dianetics or auditing or OT levels or any of that garbage is valid. I have no respect for any of that. I think if I was in my early 20s, and I apologize, I'm getting a little sleepy. I take something for sleep and it's kicking in, but that's why I'm doing that. But I just I take umbrage with all of those people who come out of Scientology and they still practice it or promote it, and it's all bad. It's all bad. We know that Hubbard was bad. We know that he bullshitted the world. We know that he created a scam religion. There is nothing redeemable in that religion. Absolutely nothing. So, and it's all idiocy if you really look at it. If you really study it, it's all bullshit. As Jesse Prince said, nobody at the higher end of Scientology was even practicing Scientology. You'd be looked at like an idiot, he said, if you were even to be caught doing any form of Scientology, that they duped the world on in terms of, extorting people for money. Apparently, they're very good at that, so they have a lot of property. And they intersect with a lot of other cults, obviously, a lot of American cults. For some reason, this one in particular has grabbed my attention. There's an interesting show on early Mormonism on Netflix called Primeval, American Primeval, which shows kind of what the early Mormons were up to, and they were up to no good. And that religion is not a religion; it's a cult, and it's just as bad as Scientology, if not worse. And it's more closer to Islam than it is to Christianity. But that's a whole nother ball game, and I'm not going there. I don't want to go there. I don't care about it enough to even think about it. Um, Anybody who, well, I guess in a weird way, Joseph Smith is a progenitor of a lot of this crap. Um, he definitely showed a lot of Americans how easy it is to create a following for what the three things that every ambitious man wants, which is money, power, and women. So Mormonism is kind of the prime example of that. I think probably Hubbard and a lot of other cult leaders obviously drew from that blueprint. But obviously, there have been religious cults since the dawn of time. They're talked about in the Bible incessantly. Um, I'm drawing to mind when the Apostle Paul blinded a magician named Bar Jesus, who was trying to have followers and was a con man, and was subsequently blinded by St. Paul righteously. And he was no holds barred back then. And I'm sure he would disapprove of a number of these cults that have popped up, especially anti-Christian cults and cults that deny the divinity of Jesus Christ. Obviously, Hubbard denied the divinity of Jesus Christ. In fact, he went as far, as many other apologists or anti-Scientology people say, um, you know, denied that Christ was even real. I believe in OT3, one of his briefings said that there is no cross, there is no Christ. It's an engram, it's an R6 implant, is what he says. And which, if you study science fiction or you understand Hubbard, he's talking about memory implants and claiming that, some alien species implanted the Christian imagery and symbols in their minds millions and millions of years ago, or billions of years, or whatever he thinks. So, obviously, Scientology is a misnomer of a title. It bears no scientific value of any kind, and is more related to hypnotism than anything else, and Satanism, more related to Satanism than anything else. As the great Jerry Armstrong says, satanic Luciferianism would be the appropriate title for it. What else can I say here? I'm pretty much done. I'm not sure where else I can go with this. I think it's already 22 minutes in here. I'll probably make follow-up videos. This is very rough, but I want to get my foot in the door, kind of maybe start making content about my experiences and my studies of this fake religion, or it's a real religion, but a scam religion, or satanic religion. So I guess my next video will be a lot less rough. I'm going to post this up in the unedited form, so apologies if, the ums and ahs get annoying, but it's just a rough video right now. Yeah, not much else to speak of at the moment, so I'm going to let everybody go, and I'll probably post a video another time. Hopefully my hair will be dry and look a little better than this, but the rosemary shampoo, I swear by it, and it really does a nice job. But I don't put conditioner in my hair, and I just finger comb it, so it looks a little frazzly right now, but it looks a lot better when it's fully dry, and after a day it starts looking really good. So anyway, neither here nor there. Trying to think of anything else I could talk about. Yeah, the only thing that bothers me, honestly, the only thing that really bothers me is the anti-Scientologists who are not really anti-Scientologists, the ones who are more apologists for the organization, the ones that leave but don't really leave. You know who they are. I don't want to say names at this point. We know who they are. And they're infuriating these channels because they're all these fools that were even higher up in Scientology, some of them, and they just can't let it go. They have to continue. They find validity in it. They find redeemable qualities in Hubbard and his stupid religion. And, from an outsider perspective, it seems so stupid. I want to extend a little grace toward these people, because you have to understand the amount of brainwashing that these people have been under. It's a miracle that they escaped in the first place, and that they take any stance against Hubbard in the first place, because their brains were conditioned to never believe that anything was bad about Hubbard, and that it was just a reactive mind thought that had to be destroyed through further auditing. So you can imagine the abuse and the suffering that these individuals had, and also I take mercy on a lot of these people that come out and are anti-Scientology but are former Sea Org members, because they've been programmed like robots too, and you'll see a lot of them. They get into nasty wars with each other, and they'll start like fair gaming each other just because it's what they know. It's what they know, and the Bible does instruct us to be as shrewd as serpents, but also as tender as doves, and so. Hubbard was just an irredeemable Satanist, in my opinion. He thought he was Satan. He thought he was Lucifer. He thought he was the Antichrist. He's really just, an overweight jerk, right? So, according to Chris Shelton, not an intelligent man. I can't say I never met the man. I try to learn more about him all the time. I think, obviously, if you look at Jerry's account of who Hubbard was, it's a very unflattering portrait. Jesse's account of who he was almost comical, because he even goes into how Hubbard was acting after the first and second stroke. So Hubbard kind of got divine justice. He got kind of ironic justice, and also there's another term for it. But anyway, I guess just the reality that he was eventually, like he did to his followers, he was scammed out of money, and the scammers that were scamming him, Pat Broker and David Miscavige, took over the religion after he died, and mainly David Miscavige. Obviously, he went after Broker eventually, but essentially, Hubbard was left after a second stroke, being unable to communicate, being diagnosed with aphasia, which made it so every word that he tried to say turned into a different word, which is also a form of a curse and a form of a divine justice, because this is a man who weaponized his words, his command of the English language, to brainwash essentially thousands upon thousands of people, if not millions. So at the end of his life, he was reduced to not being able to say what he meant, not being able to get the things that he needed, because he would say something different than what he really wanted. Jesse Prince says he kept going, the BTs, and the BTs are body thetans, and he apparently was left not being able to say much more than that, apparently. And then he was conned out of his religion and out of his money, and the people who conned him became the new leaders of his movement. So that must really have been an excruciating reality to face when he understood that his life was dwindling away, that he was not a god, that he was not immortal. Clearly Miscavige told the public that Hubbard left his body, but nobody really believed that or thought that, and they got to see their demented leader, degrade over time and eventually die, like every other person does. Yeah. On that note, don't want to rehash old information either, but I've been studying this stuff a lot. Had to get some of it out of my system. I want to keep studying, and I'm interested in finding out more information always. I just enjoy it. It's just a hobby, I might move on to something else probably. I go through phases, like I said, I looked into it. Thank God I never drove to a test center when I was in my early 20s and teens, late teens. I was on a mission to fix myself and become a better person, and Scientology is one of those fake religions that promises to make you a better person, and especially to people who have a history of being abused, it becomes easy to suck people like that into the religion, because people that have come from places of abuse are often wondering, how can I improve, or there's something wrong with me where I have to improve. And Chris Shelton does a video about that, which I haven't watched, but would be of interest, where, he's basically like the whole myth of self-improvement. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think there's always room for self-improvement for any individual, but the point is not to put yourself in a box or allow others to put you in a box. And I guess Scientology promises that you won't be burdened by this life, and you'll be able to have superhuman powers, and you won't be put in any box. But the reality is, it just puts you in the most constrictive box humanly possible. Literally, they'll throw you in a room and lock it and leave you there until you submit to their demands. And people don't really understand any of this unless they've been in a cult. I have been in a New Age cult. I understand it to an extent. But I'm also interested and wary of it at the same time. And I find it a really, like I said, just love contrasting it with Roman Catholicism and just understanding more about the human side of the faith. I do believe that Christ started the Roman Catholic Church, and you know, I still believe in the faith, but I definitely am more curious and more um, critical, and also I take my time with it and I really think about it when I'm investigating things, and I definitely scrutinize things in the faith more often. I try not to blindly accept anything. However, certain things, in my opinion, can't be denied, like the miracle at Fatima, which was witnessed by over 20,000 people, not just Catholics, but doctors and atheists, all the kinds you think of. Um, so, there's a lot of truth to, in my opinion, that have been formed through miracles and other things in Roman Catholicism. That's why people study the saints. You can spend your life studying saints. I'm going to cut this video now. I'm running out of speech. I got to save my voice for work tomorrow. I work when I'm in the mental health field, and I need to use my voice to help the disabled people that I work with, keep them safe. Thank you for listening, and hopefully next time, the next video, my hair will be dry, and I won't be messing with it so much, and I hope to have more organized discussions about what I find in anti-Scientology and in the religion itself, and comparing it to my own experiences with Catholicism, the New Age cult that I was in for a year, and also evangelical Christianity. But I think that my study has been kind of ended in terms of, Jerry Armstrong is kind of like just a brilliant period at the end of that sentence about what we really know Scientology to be. If you have a chance, go on John Atack's channel and watch his recent speech that was put up there. I believe it's called Going Clear 18. It has Jerry Armstrong doing a speech, and he basically puts the nail in the coffin for Scientology. So if you just want to watch one video that sums up everything, that's the one to do it. And I can guarantee you that everything he says in that video is 100,000% accurate. And totally genius. The way he contrasts black and white Luciferianism and goes into how exactly Scientology is satanic Luciferianism through the words of Hubbard himself. These documents have been authenticated to be real by many Scientologists in the community. So it's definitely worth a view. Anyway, I'll check you later. I'm going to try to upload this to my YouTube, see what happens. Thank you so much. Bye now.